I wanted to warn you that today's episode with Emily McGill has quite a bit of noise in the background. There had been some repair work to the outside of her apartment building, and they were taking down the scaffolding. So thank you for bearing with us, and I hope it's not too distracting. Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I geek out about the stories we are passionate about in all different genres, styles, and formats. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and I started this podcast in the summer of 2020 at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. As I watched the reaction of my friends, family, and social media circle, I noticed that many people turned to stories for comfort and help in making sense of the craziness going on around them. My goal was to do the same for my listeners, but as I chatted with my guests throughout the first year, I discovered that their personal stories were the most fascinating thing about each episode. Neil Gaiman says, "Fairy tales are more than true not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten." I now know that sharing our experiences with others helps us defeat our own dragons. It is our stories that connect us to one another. Let's see what wisdom today's guest has to share with us. Oh, Emily, I'm so excited to talk to you because I was looking at your Podmatch profile and oh my goodness, you have so many things, your fingers and so many things. I said, I don't even know where to start. So today is episode 56 and Emily McGill is my guest. And Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Lucinda.
So I'm going to let you start where you want to start because I was like, what? She's done that. She's done this. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited.
We can start wherever you want. Tell me where you want to start.
Okay. I'm going to start with one of my favorite actors. And you were involved with A Raisin in the Sun, Denzel Washington. Tell me about that.
It was amazing.
Broadway show.
Yeah, I kind of had a singular ambition for most of my life to work on Broadway. Mm-hmm. I always knew my parents put me in dancing school when I was 3. We found, one of the local theater companies when I was 12. And it was always sort of like, that's all I wanted to do. And I didn't think I wanted to be a performer. I mean, I did think I wanted to be a performer because I didn't know you could do anything else, right? Like you don't understand that there, oftentimes as a young person, there's an entire ecosystem of business that happens to support those people that are on stage. Right. You don't think about the fact that not only do you have, a director and a stage crew and a stage manager and choreographers and designers, but you also have producers, general managers, company managers, marketing teams, advertising teams, law teams, finance teams, operations teams. You don't think about all of those other jobs that are available to you.
Right.
And until I moved to New York, I didn't either. I knew I didn't want to be on the business side. I thought I wanted to be a producer, but I wasn't really sure. And I decided to audition the first year I was in New York to have done it. But again, had already made the decision that that's not what I wanted to do. So I got an internship with a producer's office. And it was one of those kismet instances where we were having a Tony Awards party. My brother had already been performing on Broadway. He was in his second show. We had some of his castmates and friends over for a party. And one of them had recently shifted from casting into a producer's office. And I said, "You don't need an intern, do you?" And she said, "No, do you want to be one?" And it was the most beautiful window opening to me saying, "Come on, hurry up. Like we're going to get you in this room, however you want to get in." So I started interning with her and I did lots of different internships in different places and kind of landed in a PR office unexpectedly. didn't really quite know what they did, but had the opportunity to work with Valerie Harper, another amazing, wonderful human celebrity. Just like one of the best humans I've ever known in my life. She was such a gem. And I saw what the press agent or the press rep or publicist did with her. And I was like, that looks fun. That would be cool. But I didn't know what she did at her office all day.
Right.
So I ended up getting a job in a PR office, started there, enjoyed it thoroughly. And when that office shut down, went to another Broadway PR office. And up to that point, I'd only worked on musicals. So I've done Billy Elliot, the musical, Memphis, the musical, Ghost, the musical. I did a couple off-Broadway shows, like all kinds, but always musicals. And in going to this new office, I was working on plays, which was really cool and very different for me. And I was fortunate because I had the opportunity on first date to work with a big PR agency that was representing one of the celebrities in the show and had a good relationship with them. And so when I walked into our press day for the media to come and sort of meet and greet the cast and talk to the director and all of these things, I walked in and there was this publicist that I already knew that was there with Denzel because his rep was on the West Coast. And she was like, oh my God, hi, how are you? And, it was this beautiful sort of embracing moment. She knew me. She knew my work. She knew that she could trust me. She knew that I would come through. And she introduced me immediately to Denzel's security person. And he and I hit it off because Denzel had been filming a lot in Pittsburgh where I grew up.
Oh, yeah.
And so he was like, oh, you're from Pittsburgh. Oh my God. Like I love Pittsburgh. So we started talking about that. So immediately there was sort of like the people that were in his orbit were like, okay, she's good. And, it was still a relatively new job at that point. So my boss was, handling all of this stuff. Like this is a major celebrity. And at one point he like had a cold or something and didn't want to go to the theater because he didn't want to risk getting anyone else sick. So I got sent, and it was my first time like interacting with Denzel one-on-one. We would send things to his reps and they would say, just go ask him. Like he's going to tell you yes or no. We're just here to facilitate his wants and needs. So just go straight to him. And I was so nervous.
I bet.
So nervous, and then it was really funny because all of a sudden, I go in and I was like, hey, we had to like talk about getting this interview set up if he wanted to do it. Did he want to do it in his dressing room? Pretty quickly after that, his publicist stopped sending anyone from their office and they would just send me. And so I was always the person accompanying him for all of his interviews. Now, granted, for big things like opening night and stuff, his reps came in from LA and they were there to support him. But for the sort of the day-to-day, they were keeping tabs on it. But as the show representative, I was much more working with him directly. And it's so cool because he is so dedicated to the work that's in front of him. He lived like a monk during that show. He was not going out, it was rehearsal and home or performance and home. And when you're Denzel Washington, you can't exactly go walking through Times Square to walk home either. Right. Like there is that part that you can't, you can't just like go enjoy your walk home. You have to be taken somewhere so that you don't have to worry about security purposes and things like that. So it was really awesome to get to sort of see things on that level. I've been working on Broadway for a long time, but this is the first time with like major celebrity like that. And it was also, so many people like, oh my gosh, Denzel, he's so handsome. He's so suave. And I was just kind of like, you mean dad over here? Like to me, he was just like, it might as well have been like my friend's dad that I was like, just making sure it was like getting to where they needed to go to,
Right.
And so it was really, really fun to get to be part of that with him. And it was a really big gift because I became very dear friends with the director of that play, Kenny Leon, who had directed Denzel in Fences to his Tony and Viola Davis, of course, hers, and had directed the first revival of A Raisin in the Sun. with Felicia Rashad and Audra McDonald winning their Tonys, and Sanaa Lathan and Puff Daddy were in that one, and now doing it again. And one of my favorite things about that whole experience was that it taught me to love plays.
I love that.
I was always a musical kid before that. I was like, if there's no tap dancing, I really am not interested. Like, give me a big splashy show. And working on that play and getting to know Kenny as a director and sort of seeing things through a director's eyes allow me to have like a deeper understanding of the beauty of a straight play. And so that's actually one of my favorite things about that project was the love of plays that came from it for me.
Oh, wow. That is so cool. So now how did you transition from doing all this stuff on Broadway? Are you still working on Broadway?
Kind of. I did an off-Broadway play this holiday season. There aren't many shows that are on Broadway right now. The industry is definitely going through both an economic reckoning and also a social justice reckoning. There are a lot of issues that systemically, inherently are built into how the theater runs. And there are questions about, how we move forward from here.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And some days I'm on board and ready to be part of it. And some days I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Right.
So it sort of ebbs and flows for me in that sense. But right around the same time I was working on A Raisin in the Sun, my grandmother passed away. Oh. And we had just finished the play. We were working on the next play. And it was kind of sudden. She had been, she had cancer. She had all kinds of medical issues. She had finally sort of moved into an assisted facility where, actually, I think she was thriving because the isolation that she had experienced in her own apartment disappeared. Right. Because she was forced to socialize with other people. Her sister was also in the same facility. So it was, I think, really nice for them to have time together. They had lived in the same building until my great aunt had needed additional assistance. And she kind of peacefully went in her sleep one night and, they woke up in the morning and she was gone. And it was really devastating, but it was also the catalyst that sent me to therapy. And my entire life changed. My entire life changed January 15th, 2014. July 15th, 2014. I wouldn't have started therapy at that time if my grandmother hadn't passed. And that was the sort of that catalyst. And it was one of the best gifts I've ever been given was my sort of own journey of self-awareness and self-discovery. Right. And in that process became my sort of reintroduction to spirit or introduction to spirituality, because I was raised Catholic. And am very much lapsed and, had a lot of disagreements and challenges with the sort of ways the church worked and belief systems and things like that. Like it didn't align for me. And so I just kind of rejected the whole idea of religion and therefore connection with higher power, because I didn't understand that there was an option that was just between you and your higher power, and spirituality. So it really offered me this opportunity to sort of start exploring that on my own and what my own relationship to my higher power was. And every now and again, when I wasn't sure what to do about something, or if I needed some more direction, my therapist would say, why don't we pull some cards? Oh, cool. And so she actually introduced me to the tarot. Oh, wow. She was the one that said, well, let's see what the cards have to say. Right. And so we would. Yeah. I don't do tarot very often, but I do have medicine cards and other kinds of cards. Like oracle decks and things. Yeah. Because one thing that it does for me is when I pull a card, you can have all kinds of different stories about what it's telling you, but absolutely. What it does for me is it makes me go inside and go, oh yeah. Okay. I have to deal with that thing. Yeah. The directional, right? It's the, oh yeah. I always like to say that tarot is like a visual representation or a physical representation of information that we hold within ourselves. So whether that information's in your heart or in your gut and hasn't quite made it to your head yet, you still have the ability to access it. It's almost like, for the young folks out there, like texting yourself a meme.
Right.
Like if you're like, oh, this is what I'm feeling. And then you can maybe wrap your brain around a little better, have a little more of a realization of, okay, yep, got it. That's where I need to focus my energy, or that's where I need my attention to go, or that's something I need to let go from my life, or that's a person that I need to maybe connect with or disconnect from. Right. Like it can offer up some of that information.
Yeah. It can help you see areas that you need to heal too. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I totally get the whole thing about not wanting to be involved in religion, a specific religion, because I grew up in a religion, and in the church that I grew up in, you could be baptized at 8 and then confirmed by the ministers of the church. And the day that I was confirmed, my dad and another minister, when they laid their hands on my head to say the prayer for me of confirmation for me, it was like, that's when I had the connection with God. And so I always called it my little voice. I would get little messages, growing up, and I don't call it that so much anymore, but when I was younger, I would call it my little voice. And I would, it was like little clues. Oh, well, here's an option for you. Or,
yep, signs from the universe.
Right. Or you might want to think about this. Or, I remember one really big one was after I graduated from high school, I just did not want to go to college right away. And, my little voice said, it's okay. You can go later. It's okay. You don't have to go now. Go to work.
Yeah.
And so I did for 4 years. I worked. Well, the first year out of high school, I did this volunteer thing for the church, which was being a teacher's aide at a inner city school in Portland, Oregon. It was 90-something% Black. That was a really great experience for me. It helped me learn confidence and stuff. And then after that, I worked in Montessori school. And then when I was 22, I was ready to go to college.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I'm in the process of potentially going back to school. I was kind of, I hear you on the, like, this isn't what I want to do right now. I didn't really have a choice. It was like, you're going and you're going now. So the choice I made was to go for theater. And that felt like that wasn't school to me.
Right.
So that I was like doing the things that I wanted to be doing.
Right. Yeah.
And so that was sort of like my way around it a little bit. And I truly never thought I would go back to school ever. Academics and like youth education was something that always came really easily to me. I didn't have to work very hard for it. I did well without having to put in much effort. And I liked the tactile learning in life of like not necessarily being lectured to or, but I also, pandemic hit, Broadway gets completely shut down. When that's been your whole identity for 20 years, 25 years, what do you do? Right. You have to start excavating what else is in your identity, right. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I kind of realized, sorry, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear on your podcast. You can bleep me out. I ended up somewhere I didn't mean to be. Yeah. I had built this PR company on my own after having worked on that on Raising the Sun and then working in a big PR agency. I had gone and done that thing. I had started my own company after that. Was working at Disney, working on The Lion King and Aladdin on Broadway while running my own business, keeping myself like really in this thing. And then January 2020 rolls around. I had the best month to date financially in my business, and I could not have been more miserable. Oh, yeah. And I was like, what am I doing here? How did I get here? And how do I get out of it? Oh, yeah. And then the pandemic hit and I didn't have to worry about getting out of it because the universe did it for me. We were all forced in this really traumatic time to take a collective pause.
Right.
And that pause allowed me to reevaluate, what do I actually want to do? And just before the new year, my therapist told me about a program at Columbia that is through their teachers college. It's a program in clinical psychology and spirituality. And I was like,
cool.
yes. It was such a quick yes, Lucinda. It was such a quick yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, from the day she told me about it, I started by the process of researching and application and all of that. It was roughly a month until the application was due. I think it was 5 weeks from the day. A month after the application was due, I had my interview.
Oh, wow. Cool.
I don't know if I got in yet or not, but in a million years, I never thought I would go back to school ever.
Yeah.
And now here I am saying, oh, but wait, again, this feels like it was just such an easy yes.
Well, and that's mine was a little different. I did religious studies first and then added theater.
It's so funny that I'm like inverting that, because religious studies was the first thing I thought I would study when I thought about going back to school. And it had less to do about like religious belief systems and more I was curious about religious ritual, the ritualistic practices that came in to beliefs. And, you know, I've always had a fascination with ancient cultures of all kinds. The Egyptians happen to be the ones we know the most about, but like, you know, take me back to that Library of Alexandria, take me back to the Incas and the Mayans and the Aztecs, take me back to all of these cultures in Africa and the Middle East and China that didn't have written language and were all oral histories. Like, take me back there. Like that. And so I'm like, the religious studies was totally the inspiration now. And then like this Columbia program came in. So I love that you were like, let me start in the religion and then move into the theater. That's so cool.
Well, and the religion thing for me, it was in the 70s. So the women were not ministers in the church that I grew up in at that time. And so I was the only woman in the program, but I really went.
Thanks for breaking that glass ceiling.
Oh, well, there had been others before me.
Sure, but you did it.
Yeah, it was difficult because there were, you know, people who were trying to convince me that I shouldn't do it. But the reason I did it is I wanted to hear the stories. I was interested in the stories about Moses and the people, you know, I wanted to hear all of those.
Where did these stories come from?
Right. I wanted to hear the stories of Islam and of Zoroastrianism and, you know, all those different religions. I was interested in that. That's what I was interested in. And so I kind of understand that whole wanting to know about the ancient history and that I understand that. I understand.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you think about it too, it is literally our most ancient tradition and culture and practice as humans, gathering around the campfire and telling stories so you don't die.
Right.
That's how it started.
Right.
Story was literally life or death.
Right. Right.
And like, it's not that anymore. Sometimes it can feel like that.
Right.
You know, but like that's where it started. And it's so, I think, innately in our DNA.
Yes, I think so too. And that's why it took me a while to figure out about what kind of podcast I wanted to do. I knew it for quite a while before the pandemic. I knew that I wanted to do a podcast, but you know, I had to go through that whole mental process, emotional and mental process. Well, what should my podcast be about? You know, blah, blah, blah. You know how that works. And so finally,
the creative process.
Right.
The creative discovery process, really, because it was already there. You just had to sort of excavate and discover which direction you were going.
Exactly. And so one day I realized my favorite class to teach at the college is dramatic structure, where we watch movies and we talk about how they're put together so you can get the theme of the movie. And what elements, like the plot, the characters, the setting, the music, all those, the language that's used, how do those play into helping you understand the theme of the movie? And when I thought of that, I went, oh, Well, that's what my podcast is going to be about. It's going to be about story.
Yeah.
So now I want to know a little bit about your use of the tarot, and also you're going to do your own deck. You're creating your own tarot deck.
I am. Yes. Working on it.
Talk about that.
Yeah. That was also a sort of pandemic idea. Like I said, my therapist was the one that sort of introduced me to the idea, and not to the idea of creating my own deck, but to the idea of tarot, period. And when she, I guess it was probably like the summer of 2018, maybe, I was looking for a daily practice for myself, just something to just for me. I didn't really have any sort of thing that I did. She said, why don't you start pulling a card? And I was like, well, I don't have any cards. And she said, well, you could download an app for your phone. That was easy, right? Like, $10 app is sure pricey for an app, but pretty cheap for a tarot deck. So I was like, great. And that little red bubble reminded me every morning,
right?
Get rid of the bubble. So I would be able to pull a card. It would give me my day's card, and I could tap my screen. And it would give me the description. And so I started to learn what the different cards meant and things like that. And started to learn more about the structure, right? Because that's the biggest difference between like an oracle deck and a tarot deck. Is the tarot deck has a specific structure. You have the major arcana and the minor arcana. So you have the magic cards, right? Our major arcana are sort of magic cards. When they show up, we pay special attention to those. They correspond to the human soul's evolutionary journey. So we start out with the 0, the Fool, the numberless number, and then we sort of like go off on this journey together towards the world, that whole, healed, sort of like holy, self-holy energy. And then the minor arcana is like a traditional deck of playing cards, right? So you've got your 4 suits, you have ace through 10, but then you have 4 court cards instead of 3. So you'll have a king and a queen, a knight and a page. Sometimes you might see prince and princess. Sometimes you might see father, mother, son, and daughter. Kind of just depends on the author's, choice.
Right.
And each of those four suits corresponds to one of our elements. So we've got our fire, water, earth, and air all represented in the deck. And my moon is in Virgo. So I love structure. Structure helps me like keep myself together. So there's something in the structure of the tarot deck that I really, really, really love. Like that it sort of sits on this scaffolding. That you know where anything sort of, once you understand the scaffolding, you can better understand how to move through the house. Right?
It's interesting that the scaffolding is coming down around you as we're talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For sure. Right? It's all connected.
I know.
Like the scaffolding outside my building's coming down, and I'm trying to build new scaffolding for myself in here at the same time. Yeah. Yeah. But the tarot is full of archetypes. That's the whole point is like all the different cards have meanings and archetypes, and you find that there are similarities in so many stories. I mean, look at, all of the Greek and Roman myths, and I mean, global myths, period. Right. I just got a really cool new deck called Tarot of the Divine, and it's all international myths. It's cool. I love it.
Yeah.
And it's like, this one is a Korean fairy tale. This one is a Romanian fairy tale. This one is a Mexican fairy tale, like whatever the sort of region that, and so it's all different stories, and that it's in the theater too, right? Like we see these different characters, these different archetypes. The Fool is a character that's going off on a journey to find themselves. Well, that sounds surely like Pippin to me, if I've ever heard anything, right? Like Pippin, gotta find my corner of the sky,
right?
The High Priestess is all about your intuition and listening to yourself, and like knowing that you do have this connection to your higher power. You do know what's right. That certainly sounds like Elphaba from Wicked to me, if I've ever heard it, right? Like she's going to buck everything around her because she knows what's right for her.
Right. Yeah.
And so like these ideas that you can find the correlations between beloved characters in the musical theater canon and the Broadway canon. And, this first deck is all musicals, but I do hope to be able to put a plays deck together now that I have such a love for plays that I've cultivated over the last several years, right? Like I do have dreams to sort of make this bigger.
Right.
But right now I'm doing a fun research project for myself. Lincoln Center Performing Arts Library has an archive.
Oh, wow.
And anyone can go in. You have to make an appointment and you have to have, a special library card for the restricted access, but it's not hard to sign up for that online. And you can just go in and make an appointment and watch any show they have in their catalog, provided that you don't need any sort of special permission, right? Some of them you need special permissions and things like that, but anyone can go in. You can only watch the show once. So I will never get to see the original production of 42nd Street again, because I've already gone and done that. But if I do need to, for some reason, go watch it again, I can request special permission and like give them my reasons and things. But now I'm going up to the library once a week and watching shows I've never seen before. 42nd Street, it was a rainy day. I've seen that one. And I just really needed to get my mood up. But, I got to watch Grand Hotel, which I had never seen. Passion by Stephen Sondheim, which I had never seen. Titanic, the musical. Violet, the original off-Broadway production of Violet. I mean, I've gotten to see these shows that like I said, the original production of 42nd Street. I wasn't even alive when that show started,
Yeah.
And so
I wasn't even alive then.
Well, that's the funny thing about 42nd Street. It was originally only ever a film. It did not become a musical until David Merrick turned it into one in the 80s.
Okay. The film is the one.
Crazy?
I was
of course. Of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But the musical itself wasn't written until like 1980.
Oh,
so,
okay.
So it's, it's really cool then also to see what the pinnacle of theater looked like in the 80s, trying to do the 20s, right? Like Jerry Orbach's suit is so big because you're like, it's that like era, So, but it's just this cool project. So I'm like, there are so many characters in the canon that I am not familiar with. And so if I'm able to go into watching these shows with the idea of, is there a card in the deck they correlate to? It's been a really fun sort of research project to figure out, I'm calling it casting, right?
Yes,
casting.
right. Yeah. So in a way, you're sort of like Joseph Campbell, only you're the Joseph Campbell of Tarot.
I'll take it.
Of the Broadway correlation of Broadway characters and Tarot. Yeah.
But you think about, there's so many people who have a deep love of the theater, and like if that can help them understand themselves better, why would we not want to do that?
Right. Yes.
So,
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. So you have cards. I heard you shuffling them earlier before I started recording.
I do have a deck here with me today. This one's called the Fountain Tarot. It's really beautiful. You can't really see this with my light, but yeah, it's like iridescent, and the sides are all sort of iridescent-y and cool. And the cards are they're beautiful. They're kind of stark. Some of the colors can be kind of stark, but also like very pastel, which I know that doesn't really make sense, but yeah, so I thought we would do a reading if you're interested.
Sure. Yeah. I've never done this on Story Power before, so this should be kind of fun. Yeah.
Great. So we can either do a reading specifically for you, or we can do a general reading for anyone listening. I think anyone who's listening, whatever we do, they will find things that resonate for them anyway. Yeah. But it's up to you how you want to direct it.
This isn't going to air until sometime in the fall. So let's whatever you want to do.
It's your choice.
I was going to say, let's do one for me.
Great. Let's do one for you. Do you have a specific topic or question that you maybe are wanting to explore a little bit?
Yeah, I'm working on finding a way to make money with my podcast, my blog, my books, but not do it in a really, I'm just not into the smarmy.
Yeah, you want it to be aligned.
Right. Yeah. And I have found a couple of options that I'm still exploring. But
cool. So one of my favorite spreads is a 3-card spread, and it's what will help you, what will hinder you, and what's your untapped or your unrealized potential.
Okay. Let's do
And I
that.
literally just did this one with my assistant in our meeting right before this.
Oh, cool.
She and I were talking about something similar about how do we want to go forward in the business? What do we want to do? I know that PR doesn't light me up, but storytelling sure does. So how do we
Yes.
start to make that shift that other people see us as someone who can help them tell their story, who can help them articulate what it is they're trying to articulate, but not necessarily like trying to get a placement in the New York Times, right? Because that's not what I want to do anymore.
Yeah.
I'd rather help people with their stories than help them necessarily get their stories placed.
Right.
It's more about like that human's connection with their own story versus trying to get it out in the world, because when you do have connection to your own story, it will get told anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily need my podcast or my blog to go viral. I don't need that. If I made a little bit of money doing it, and that would help me with retirement, because I'm 68, almost 69, and I'm ready to,
When's your birthday?
April 27th.
You're Taurus. Yeah, I get that. I get that from you, that very like sort of measured, steady energy of Taurus.
Yep.
All
Just
right.
keep putting one foot in front of the other. That's
all you can do.
Yep.
Okay. So you are going to cut the cards, and you're going to do that by telling me when to stop flipping through them.
Stop.
Great. So this first card, this is what's going to help you. I love this one. This card is the Devil.
Oh.
So the Devil is a major arcana card.
Right.
This light a little bit.
It doesn't matter because it's just a vocal anyway. It's not.
Well, but for you to see it, so we can describe it a little bit for those that are listening, but for you to see. So the Devil is about 2/3 of the way through the major arcana. And we talked about how it starts with the Fool, leaping off onto this journey. And by the time we've gotten to the Devil, the Fool has had many lessons. Others have come in to help guide and teach and nurture and share and care. Relationships have been built. We've gone through that sort of hermit phase, the ups and the downs of things, right? Alchemizing things. Like we get to all these different things. Then we kind of get to the Devil. And this card is all about our shadow. And embracing the parts of ourselves that we don't necessarily like, but still embracing them with love. So, I really didn't like how I responded to my friend when they said this thing. Okay. What did they like? What about them saying that that triggered me, that made me feel a certain way, that I responded the way I did, right? Like that's the kind of like that. So that's shadow. Right. It's the reactionary self, the parts of ourselves that maybe we don't want to bring out into the light all the time. And the more we shine a light on them, the less scary they are. The more we're able to embrace them. And we can see in this card, there's kind of a figure at the top. It's kind of hard to see. We've got two other figures sort of that are cloaked below them, kind of coming out. There are some stairs sort of stepping down. And we see that, this could be a huge chamber. This could be a tiny little room. We don't know. We get to choose. And so this is saying that what will help you is maybe like embracing the imperfection, embracing the parts that don't feel quite as polished or put together, that there are still plenty of opportunities that will come from the shadow.
Oh, cool. I like that.
But got to do that shadow work, right? Got to like dive into it and engage with it in order for that to actually be helpful.
Well, I have been doing that. So yeah.
Well, there you go.
Great. There you go.
There you go. Then that sounds like it's super aligned. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. Let's see. This is the card that what will hinder you. This is the Knight of Cups. And our cups, that's our water. That's our emotions, our feelings, and our intuition. And the knight is one of our 4 court cards, right? So the page kind of corresponds to that Fool energy, right? It's very young, very youthful, very naive, very trusting. The knight is kind of more like our rebellious youth, right? It's those sort of like teen years where there's like a very active driving energy behind the knights generally. And the Knight of Cups, that is again like the action in our emotions. This could also be perhaps like a younger person who is finding their emotions that is in your life. But this is what's going to hinder you. This is the thing that's going to hinder you, is perhaps maybe not stepping into like the fullest version of the emotions that you have and the intuition and the feelings that you have access to, right? Because like as someone who has lived experience, you know better in so many ways, shapes, and forms. You know how things haven't worked for you in the past. You know that like, and so what this is probably saying to me is like, you know, if you step into something with as an emotional response, that is not helpful. And that's not saying you can't have the emotions. You have to have the emotions. Otherwise they get stuck. The whole like emotion is energy in motion. It's energy moving through you.
Right.
And so when we hold on to that, like that's where illness and trauma and pain and stuckness, you know, sort of like meld onto our physical beings. But when we allow that full emotional experience to move through us and then move from the place after that, right? Like we've gone through the whole full emotional experience, whatever the ups and downs are. For me, sometimes it feels like a tsunami that like I'm going to drown in whatever this emotion is. But I've survived every single one of them. Right? I've survived every single time my emotions have felt too big. You come through that process and then you have the clarity to move forward.
Right.
With like real clarity. It's not clouded by the emotion.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think like that's the other thing that I'm getting from this for you is that what will hinder you is clouding things with emotion. Not to be robotic and unemotional, but to, like I said, have that full emotional experience. And now I get to deal with whatever it is that I have to deal with. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that feel like it resonates for you?
Yeah, because I have been trying to match up my emotions with, okay, I'll use this example. I just finished reading Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown, where she defines 87 emotions. And when I read one of the emotions, I just started to cry because even though this event was 20 years ago, or a series of events, I lost a job that I most loved. I realized, I hadn't identified that I had felt anguish about that. And so, so I'm trying to go back and kind of clean up old. So that's what I'm talking about the shadow stuff. I'm trying to go back and clean up old emotions that need to be fit, you know.
Yeah. I think this might be saying to you, like, it doesn't have to be as active of a process, right? Like that, I think is part of now hearing like how you're receiving it. This is also why I love tarot, because, you know, there are people that will like, just like flip cards and talk at you, but me, it's a very co-collaborative experience. And I'm sure that is partially my theater background that I'm relying on of, you know, like, let's get every Mickey and Judy, let's put on a show kind of vibe, but like everybody coming together and doing their part. Right. And so when I get a little more information and context from you as to how this resonates for you, that you are looking to sort of do that emotional housekeeping for yourself and really like tap into yourself. What this now says to me is it's not so active. Like it will come for you. It will come to you. You don't have to go to it.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I like that.
Because the universe, God, however you want to put it, will give you every opportunity that you need to do that work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
You don't have to go chasing it. It will come to you.
Cool.
That's what that says to me now. And how cool that we could have like all of that from one card.
I know, really.
Right?
Yeah.
I love it so much. All right. So this last one is your unrealized or your untapped potential. The 8 of Swords. So our swords are air.
Air.
Okay. That is anything like mental, mind, intellect, knowledge, language, communication, technology, right? It's all the things you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And the 8 is often seen as like a prisoner card, or like that kind of feeling like you're surrounded.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we can see, I mean, we see the swords being pointed at this being. This card is upside down. There is something in tarot called reversals. Some people like to read them, some don't. I like to read them. Well, for those that like to read them, a lot of people tend to read it as like the negative or inverse meaning of a card. I disagree because I think every card holds the full spectrum of its meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I like to read it as either the internal expression of a card or something that needs to be dropped from your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this instance, it sort of feels like it's the yes and of those together, because this to me feels like your untapped potential is that you feel like you're trapped a little bit in this.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know which way to go. You don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something in the relaxing, in that trappedness, you know, it's like almost like a finger trap, right? Like the second you pull, you get stuck. As soon as you relax, you can get your fingers out of it just fine.
Yeah.
And this idea of there are some limiting beliefs that you hold for yourself that need to be dropped.
Mm-hmm.
There are limiting beliefs here that you need that need to be released. There is some relaxation and surrender that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm. I see that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And as you're able to do that stuff, right? Like that, I mean, this is the best part, is that like it all goes together, right?
Right.
Like this is going to be opportunity to surrender. And we can, here, I'll flip it over so you can see, you know, like it's a figure. She's got her head bowed. She's got a little bit of a mask on. We can't really see her eyes. And she's surrounded, I mean, swords at her neck.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She looks like she's defeated.
Mm-hmm.
She's not. Because this is only the 8. There's 2 more cards, right? We go all the way up to 10.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So before that cycle starts again. So this isn't surrender. This isn't the end. This is, well, it isn't the end, but I think it is surrender.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like it's an invitation for surrender.
Yeah, that's another aspect of the thing that I'm working on is I always thought, oh, I don't know how to do business. I don't know how to market my books. And I've had a little shift recently where, well, I could, as Marie Forleo says, everything's figure outable. So I could figure out how to do that, you know.
And you're a storyteller.
I just have to be willing.
How to do that.
Yeah. I just have to be willing to learn how to do that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, when we put them all together, we see that like, what's going to help you sticking with this sort of this work of the shadow work of the, of showing up for yourself in the places that feel icky.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. Like that's the shadow work.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to go looking for it. You don't have to go looking for it. It's going to come to you. And when it comes to you, the more you surrender, the more you'll find what you're looking for on the other end of it. Right?
Yeah. Right. Cool.
How are you feeling?
Good. Mm-hmm. It's just like, it's where I am right
Sometimes people have different responses and different reactions. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah. And sometimes it just intuitively, I'll say something to somebody and I'll trigger them. It's like, oh, okay, well, so you were supposed to get triggered and I'll just back off now and let you figure that out.
Yeah. Because it's not up to you.
Right.
To navigate their triggers.
Right.
As my brother and I try to remind each other every day of each other. Right? It's like we're both here, we're both doing our thing, and neither of us means to hurt the other one.
Right.
You know, but sometimes it's childhood stuff, sometimes it's adult stuff, and sometimes it's just somebody's having a bad day.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have anything you want to say about that? About how the tarot has helped you? Or
I mean, it helps me every day. I pull a card every single day for a sort of like daily, you know, just like check in for myself. Sometimes, like I said, like I was on with my assistant right before we are recording, and like she and I did a pull during that. You know, I will, and that was the straight up business meeting. We were talking about where we have been doing, you know, much more, like I said, of like sort of PR stuff and how we evolve more into like story direction and helping people figure out their stories. And that was literally what we were talking about today. And then I was like, well, let's do a reading. And we did this exact spread. We got 3 very different cards, but it was, you know, where are we going? Okay, what's going to help us? And we had all swords, which is interesting for communication, storytelling. Yeah.
Whoa.
Right. Language, text, dialogue, right? Communication. We had the 5 of Swords, which is all about cutting out the things that don't serve you, that don't belong. Right. We had the 4 of Swords, which is all about rest. And then like, we're not going to be able to do this if we're not resting and caring for ourselves.
Right.
And then we got the Knight of Swords, which is like, you know, that active, like get out there and start talking about it.
Wow. That's interesting.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it is.
But also it's like the cards never lie. It's always the right cards in the right moment for whatever that reading is. If we had recorded this an hour later, a week later, any other time yesterday, it would have been a completely different reading.
Right. Exactly.
Because you were in a different space than you are in the moment that we started this.
Right. Yeah.
And I am too.
Right. Yeah, because I'm not sure that how many people listening to this are going to go, oh man, tarot. But, you know, I see that there are so many tools out there to help us, because this, over my 68 years, there are so many things that we hide from ourselves. And that we stuff down, and that we think, oh, if I stuff it down, I won't have to deal with it.
Right.
But then it comes up, it always comes up later.
Yeah, sure. And if it doesn't come up emotionally, it shows up as like cancer or, you know, heart disease or digestive issues or kidney failure or whatever it is. Like, name the list of you know, problems that Americans have in their health. I mean, that we have globally in health. And like, so often it comes from trauma.
Right. So some sort of spiritual practice that's just vital to my life.
Yeah.
I don't always use the cards. I read Pam Grout's version of A Course in Miracles every day. That's one of the things I do every day. I write in my journal, not every day, but I write in my journal when I feel like I need to. So there are lots and lots of tools.
Absolutely.
Use. Meditation.
Absolutely. Yep. And the tarot to me is just one more tool in my tool belt, you know? And if I could demystify it for one of your listeners, I think I have done my job. If one person is open to the idea of tarot after us having to have this conversation, I'm thrilled. Like, that's what I'm out here to do, you know, to just help people see that there are other ways and modalities and practices that you can use to live your best life, your most favorite self.
Right.
Because like this idea of best self, I cannot get behind. I cannot get behind this idea of best self.
Well,
most favorite self. Absolutely.
Yes, because nobody's ever perfect anyway. So yeah.
Right.
I like that, most favorite.
Right. And your best self changes every day. Right. My best self one day might be more interested in tarot. My best self another day might be more interested in theater. My best self on a different day might not care about either of them.
Right.
But they're all my favorite self because I love all of those things. And I might, just be hungry. Like,
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. Now, so do you want to talk about any of your other endeavors? Because what was there, snob, and you said you're a crazy plant lady, which I thought was so funny.
Yeah.
And you've worked in so many different things. Do you want to talk about that a little bit before we go?
Yeah, I mean, plants are sort of a meditation for me. I was actually talking to my best friend about this weekend, telling her about how I'm trying to add a 10-minute meditation to my day right now. And she was like, that's so interesting. I always kind of thought that like you tending to your plants was a meditation. And I was like, oh yeah, I never really considered it that way.
Yeah.
But I live in New York City, like I said, a block and a half from Times Square. And so there's not a lot of green around me. So I've brought some into my home and I love caring for my plants. Actually, I spent quite a bit of time yesterday throwing a bunch out that were infected with thrips that I knew I wouldn't be able to save, right? Because it was like these dracaenas and spider plants and things that like they got way in there. And it's like, no matter how the plant grows, it's going to die. Yeah. So, I unfortunately had to behead a bunch of plants and pitch a few. And then I thought, well, that'll be an opportunity for some new ones. So, that making space for something else. So yeah, I love that. And Snob is great. We're kind of on hiatus right now because, of the Omicron spike we had in New York over the holidays. And Snob stands for Sunday Night on Broadway, which is a Broadway industry dance party that I host with two friends who are DJs and Broadway performers. And our one co-founder, Ari, is she's in Tina Turner the musical. She plays Tina's sister, and she also understudies Tina and has played Tina. And we just don't want to be the ones that are responsible for a show not being able to perform because a large number of people are sick, and we know that this community will come together and will gather. And we've all, throughout the pandemic, we've been very cautious anytime we do gather to make sure that not only in New York State, you have to be fully vaccinated in order to, do anything indoors, but we've also been requiring negative testing because, if somebody in a Broadway show gets sick and it starts getting around, as we saw during the holidays, entire shows can go down for several days and weeks at a time as, they get the manpower, human power back to be able to run their shows. And it's not just the cast that gets sick, right? Like, I was working on a holiday show this year, and we had our entire cast did not miss a single performance. We had to cancel a couple of performances because members of our crew were sick with COVID. So it's not just, the people on stage, it's also the people backstage. There's as much backstage choreography as there is onstage choreography.
Right.
And so, we're on hiatus for now because I can't in good conscience bring together a large number of people in the Broadway community, right, where I know people are going to be dancing and drinking and not wearing their masks and having a good time. And we need that. I'm just not going to do it indoors right now. And it's too cold to do it outside.
Right. Exactly.
So unfortunately, our dance party is on a little bit of a hiatus until we can safely gather once again.
Yes. Yes. This has been such a long lesson, I guess I want to say, this whole COVID thing. But it's also been really creative for me because I started my podcast during the beginning of that was something that at the very beginning, I kept saying, I'm so curious to see what kind of creativity comes out of this. Right. Because like when you're forced to get creative, you get creative. Well, thank you so much for talking to me. Do you have anything else you want to say? No, I mean, if anybody's interested in learning more about tarot or wants to do a reading with me, you can find me on my website, or I spend most of my time online on Instagram, although I am starting to learn TikTok too. Just because I'm a geriatric millennial doesn't mean I can't get with it.
They do call me a geriatric millennial. I just like that boggles my mind, but sure. Why not? Why not?
You're so young to me.
Yeah. I did grow up in the era of riding your bikes out on the street and, being home before the street lights came on and dial up internet. And like, not everyone had a computer. You had to go wait in your turn in line to play Oregon Trail in the back of the classroom. Right. Like it was a very different time.
Right. Yeah.
That's
funny.
Yeah. So TikTok, I'm learning, but Instagram, Emily Ann, ANNEMCG. That's me.
Okay, great. Yes, I will put all of your social media links into the show notes, and any shows that we've talked about, and the tarot deck. I will put that in there too that we use.
Great. Yep. The Fountain Tarot. And I will take a picture of these and send them to you so you have them for yourself. Or if you would like to, share that in the show notes, if folks would like to maybe see for a visual of what they're hearing us talk about.
Right. Yeah. I do have a tarot deck. I just don't use it very often. The Rider-Waite is the one.
Yeah. Rider-Waite Smith. We love that. Pamela Coleman Smith.
But
the first deck drawn by a woman.
Yeah.
To like really hit the mainstream.
I don't use that very often.
That's all right. And the thing I love too about that deck is it became sort of the template by which all other intuitive decks were built upon. And I just love that so much.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. And you take care. And I hope the noise of the taking down the scaffolding
seems kind of quiet now.
It does finally. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no. Hey, life happens. And, sometimes you'll hear the Border Patrol going over our house. So, so today it's quiet. No Border Patrol helicopters. But yeah. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Before I go, I'd like to give a big shout out to Podmatch, which I call a dating service for podcasters. Since I joined their platform, I have met so many wonderful people from all over the world, and they make the matches so easy that if you are a podcaster or you have a message that you want to share, you might want to consider checking them out. The affiliate link is at the bottom of my show notes on my website at sagewomanchronicles@sagewoman.life. Part of what I love about them is that they promote civil conversations, and can't we use that right now? So if you check them out, tell them Lucinda sent you. I'd also like to invite you to my Patreon community, where we will have chats with authors or creators. We'll have member chats about the stories that they love, and occasionally we'll have extra episodes or uncut episodes of Story Power. So please go check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/storypower without the hyphen, all one word. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. And remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.